Alright, here goes podcast type thing episode 3. I'm just gonna keep calling it that for a little while. We're working on getting this onto iTunes so it will be easier for y'all to listen to, because unless you're paying YouTube, I know you can't close the app and listen. So I will let you know when that happens. And for this week, I actually did put a post out on Instagram for this video because I ran out of questions and I got a lot of good ones, so not gonna cut into any more of the time, just gonna go ahead and get started. And this question is from Javier, who is actually asking a question that I addressed in the barbershop talk, but since then a lot of different opinions have come out, so I'm gonna do a long form thing here. And he's just saying, in case nobody asks, should Zion sit out and wait for the draft? Yes, if you've been living under a rock, you saw what happened to Zion in the first 30 seconds of that North Carolina game, and it was the nightmare scenario that we all hope never ever happens to any player, but especially not a one and done player that teams are already tanking for and fans are already getting excited for. So his foot just exploded through his shoe. As a result, he did a split and he sprained his knee, and it could have been much worse, could have been a lot worse, could have definitely been a tear, and two opposing sides have come out since then. The night that it happened, I saw more people on my side saying this should be the last college game that Zion ever plays, no reason for him to ever step back on the court. And then we saw a lot of professionals, Kobe Bryant, Charles Barkley, and a lot of people agreeing with him that he made a commitment to the college, so when he's healthy, he needs to be back on the floor and playing. And people sent me those opinions because they heard what I had to say about it in the barbershop talk. So I'm glad to have a chance to respond again, where I'm just gonna say, this is where we're going to have to disagree. I always disagree with Charles Barkley. However, I love listening to Kobe, and especially to listen to him talk about basketball. But we're just gonna have to disagree here. This is one of those things where I feel like there's just one answer. And the fact that it's coming from, this mentality is coming from the players who, you know, they've played their careers, they made it to the NBA. Kobe didn't even go to college. He was able to go straight from high school to the NBA. I'm pretty sure he did that for a reason. And it's just fascinating for me to sit here and hear these guys who, you know, they already have millions in the bank account and their family is set for generations. They've done things to set themselves up where money's never going to be an issue in their lives again. And it's fascinating to hear that side say, yeah, this kid needs to go, and regardless of, you know, whatever happened, if he's healthy, he should just play. And especially the people that I see running rampant in the comments that are agreeing with this and putting the 100 emoji, I just feel like they're trying way too hard to be hoop purist, and they're not thinking. Like, I can't remember who exactly said this. It was somebody that was working that game, you know, one of the broadcasts of that game. And after the game, he got on Instagram or whatever, and he filmed a thing saying, you know, okay, say Zion Williamson has like a $10 million insurance policy on his career, which I didn't even know you could have in college, but apparently, you know, some type of insurance, so if something like that does happen, hypothetically, he still gets $10 million. Not even sure if that's true or not, or if he's just using this as a hypothetical, but he's saying, okay, on the flip side of that, there's a $100 million shoe contract that Zion could be on right now in the NBA. So regardless of what happens, he just lost $90 million if he has a serious injury or something happens where he doesn't get that contract when he goes to the NBA next year. Now obviously it didn't turn out to be that serious, but he's talking about hypotheticals. And I hate to sit here and just sound like it's all about money and has nothing to do with the love of the game, but it's both. It's just like how NBA players, you know, they make it to the league and, you know, you hear trade rumors and whatever else you hear and they say, oh, it's a business. It's because it is. It's part love for the game, but it's part business as well. So if you're Zion, what you have to look at this point is it's March. March Madness starts this month. And knee sprains are a thing where if you're in the league, you might just do like Steph Curry did and tolerate it. When he sprained his knee in the 2016 NBA playoffs, he came back because his team needed him and he just said, I'm going to go all out for the title, and then I'm going to take off the Olympics and I'm going to rest my knee there. But if you're Zion, first of all, only he knows if that knee is going to be 100% in time for the March Madness. I don't know how these work. I'm not a doctor, but they can definitely take a while. And so we would hate to see a situation where he's just rehabbed as fast as he could just so he could get back onto the court, because that's really what Steph Curry was doing. He was getting treatment during the playoffs so he could play in individual games. So Kobe is not suggesting that Zion does that. At least that's what it sounds like. But what you're looking at in this specific situation is that it was a freak accident. Nobody's foot goes through their shoe. That's something that happens once in a blue moon. Last time I remember that was Ginobili like years ago. Doesn't happen often, but a freak accident can change change everything. So at this point where you've had one of those happen, it was a free accident and you escaped, you luckily escaped, why would you ever put yourself in a situation again before you sign your NBA contract where you could potentially be risking, if not all of it, a very large percentage of it? Why? Like, what's the point of it? So for Kobe and Charles, it's this whole love of the game thing. We play basketball, this is what we do. Love of the game is not going to pay the bills by itself. Love of the game is not going to set up your family for generations by itself. I'm definitely not a part of the ignorant shut up and dribble crowd, but in this particular scenario, I feel like the NBA players are past the NBA legends that are giving Zion this advice about he made a commitment, now go finish it. I feel like they're just a bit out of touch on this one. Kobe Bryant lost years of his career in the blink of an eye. A move he'd made 100 times, nothing different. He just took a step and pop, Achilles was gone just like that. He was never the Kobe Bryant we once knew again. That's how quickly it can change. Kobe was okay because by then he had already made hundreds of millions of dollars. If something like that happens to Zion, a freak accident happens again and he's not so lucky this time. He does not have hundreds of millions of dollars to fall back on. He doesn't have an NBA career to fall back on. If you're a hooper, you gotta love the game, but you gotta have a business mind as well because that's how the schools treat it, that's how the leagues treat it. You gotta find a balance. It just can't be this whole thing of I love the game and at all costs I'm just gonna do this. I think that's ridiculous and I think Zion should never play another college game again. Alright, so shifting gears a little bit. This question says, will Kyrie stay with the Celtics? Of course, as a Boston fan, I've got to address this because I didn't necessarily want to make an entire barbershop talk about it. I just had some things that I wanted to toss out there about this subject. Clearly, we all feel the tension that's coming from the Celtics. They're on this losing streak right now. Kyrie's free agency is coming up at blinding speed. The last time he was asked about it, and you know, the media was asking him about what he was talking about with KD. Like, it's just always so much anger and frustration about his free agency decision. And a lot of people are starting to put the comment, he gone, under every Kyrie post, he gone. Well, I asked this question. I asked it on Twitter because realistically, I wanted to know, where is Kyrie? There's two things I'm going to mention here. First, where is Kyrie going to go? Where is he going to leave from Boston? Because this is still a pretty good situation for him, and I'm going to get more into why in a moment. But like, what teams would he go to besides the New York Knicks, where of course they have the market, they have the cap space to sign another star with him, and he can go do his own thing there. He can take a gamble going to the Clippers and hoping that somebody follows him there. When you start looking at like the positions and what teams already have what assets, there's really a shortage of how many teams it makes sense for Kyrie to leave to. In terms of what teams can afford him, what teams need a point guard like him, I think there's only a few places that make sense. And no, I don't think he's going to leave the Celtics because I think Danny Ainge has one play this summer, and I think it's been in play since February, since the trade deadline. There was a report that came out where apparently he told the Pelicans, just hold on the trade talks with Anthony Davis, wait till we can join the table this summer. Everyone knows that a deal like this probably has Jason Tatum involved. Even Tatum knows. He said that he would trade himself for Anthony Davis, so we all know what's going on here. And the way things are going right now, the Celtics have that talent where nobody would be surprised if they made an NBA Finals run. But they don't have the composure of a finals team because when they lose, everybody's in the media making snarky comments to reporters. There's just all this tension and anger coming out of the locker room, and you're supposed to be mad about losing, you're supposed to be angry about losing, but you're also supposed to handle it a certain way. And in my opinion, they don't handle it like champions. So for that reason, I'm also not surprised if they're bounced in the second round. But with that being said, being bounced in the playoffs, and especially at an early time, that would just force Danny Ainge's hand. Everyone has already been expecting him to try to make a move for Anthony Davis, and when it comes to retooling a team that disappointed this season and trying to keep Kyrie, his best play is to do whatever he has to do to get Anthony Davis with Kyrie Irving. I think that's what he's going to go for, and I think there is a high chance of that happening. If the Celtics are successful with a deal like that where they are able to bring in AD, I have no clue why Kyrie would go anywhere. Now that being said, if something happens and the Pelicans find a more attractive deal, say they swing a deal for Zion Williamson with whoever gets him, and Boston isn't lucky enough to land AD, then yeah, I could see Kyrie going off, especially, if it's off of an early exit. I could then see him and another free agent going to New York. I don't think that's far-fetched at all. That leads right into the next question. This comes from Adam, and he says, what would be the most shocking move this offseason in your opinion? What would shock me most is Klay Thompson leaving the Golden State Warriors, because I feel like everything else kind of has a track that it looks like it's following and it's not really going to change. Like, it just seems like Kimbo will stay in Charlotte. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised if Kevin Durant leaves, given that he says he wants a lot of money and we know that his legacy needs something else on it. Nobody's surprised if DeMarcus Cousins leaves because that was the plan anyways. Are we surprised if Jimmy Butler stays with the Sixers? They're contending in the Eastern Conference. They traded for him with the understanding that they were going to have a good chance to re-sign him. So for a lot of the free agents, it seems like whatever they do, it's just not that shocking. But for me, Klay Thompson leaving Golden State would be shocking for a couple of reasons. A, because the owners and management have already said that they're not going to let this team break up because of money. So this whole thing, I've seen this report a couple of times now where it says Klay Thompson may leave and join the Lakers if Golden State doesn't offer him a max. Well, from what I've heard and from what I know right now, they will give Klay Thompson whatever he wants to stay. So that's one thing. And then two, I've been reading this Steph Curry book for quite a while now, and if everything written in there is still true, which it's pretty recent, it has the 2017 finals run in there. If everything holds true, he and Klay are really good friends. So they play off of each other perfectly. They were both drafted to this team. They've been the core for this team to build around, and they're close. It just seems like it would take something really out of the ordinary to rip Klay Thompson away from the Warriors. And from a basketball standpoint, why would he leave? Like, it's not like with Kevin Durant, because from a basketball standpoint, it doesn't make sense for Kevin Durant to leave either, right? But the whole thing with him is his legacy and his money, so it may make sense for him to go somewhere else. But for Klay, we know him as the 3-and-D guy, run around the court, get your open shot. He's a perfect complementary piece. Hell, if everyone left, if it was Kevin Durant and DeMarcus Cousins, if they both happen to leave, which I don't see happening, if they both happen to leave though, you can start over with Steph and Klay and build another team around them and they can still contend. Not saying they'd be anywhere near as good as they have been, but you can start over. So there's just so many reasons. I would be shocked as hell if Klay Thompson went anywhere. That's a move I don't see happening. And it would also shock me if both Kevin Durant and DeMarcus Cousins left, if both of them left. I definitely expect one to leave, but if both left, I'd be like, wow. Because if Kevin Durant does leave, I can't figure out yet why DeMarcus Cousins would. KD leaving would mean that Golden State has money, so why would they not make DeMarcus an enticing offer where he can stay and they can contend? So yeah, that'd be extremely shocking as well. I hope that it falls off. I hope the dynasty falls off and we can get more competitive playoff basketball. But I highly doubt we're going to get lucky enough for for both of them to go away. I really don't see that happening. Yeah, also, I'd be very shocked if Kawhi Leonard left. I'd be shocked if he left the Raptors, and especially if he went to the Lakers. You know, Kawhi Leonard and, well, everyone's always been on Laker fans' radar, but because Kawhi is a free agent this summer, he's also on the menu. And with Kawhi winning the way they are in Toronto and a chance for an NBA Finals berth, I'd be so shocked if he left, and especially if he went to LA to play with LeBron James, just because I don't know if it'd be the greatest fit. Yeah, that'd be extremely shocking. Or if he went to the Clippers. I know one of the things I heard earlier this season was that the Clippers were looking at Jimmy Butler and Kawhi Leonard trying to pair them up. I'd be shocked if that happened. So there are a couple of things that would knock me off my feet, and for what it's worth, I hope they happen. Free agency is always more fun when you get blindsided. When I was a kid in the summer of 2010, when LeBron James joined Miami, that one was like a that was like a baseball swing to the face. I feel like I got hit in the face with a bat because I didn't see that. I thought he was going to the Chicago Bulls actually, so he said Miami with Wade and Bosh. Yeah, it'd be crazy. This next question probably isn't such podcast format, but I am going to answer it anyways because it's fun to think about. It says, what would happen if Kobe never got injured in 2013? How far would the Lakers go? It deserves a mention because this is something that I've always thought about. It's something that I was thinking about back in 2013 actually. There was an interview where they were asking Kobe Bryant questions on NBA TV, and a reporter asked him, how far can you guys go if you do get into the playoffs? Because at the time they were trying to get into the 8th seed, and Kobe didn't give a specific answer. He didn't want to set the expectations so super high just in case they failed probably. But I remember him saying that, you know, if we do get into the playoffs, we're not afraid of anybody. And that's because at that time, they still had, like on paper, they had the team. You had Nash, Dwight Howard, Pau Gasol, and then Kobe, who at that time, believe it or not, was having an MVP type season. That might be the best season he ever had. And so the version of history we got was they did sneak into the playoffs, but unfortunately they did not have Kobe and they were swept by the San Antonio Spurs. How does that change if they have Kobe Bryant playing at the level that he was playing at? You know, I would love to sit here and say that it would be some fairy tale and Kobe drags them through the playoffs and they get to the finals and play the Heat, or they go far, like get to the conference finals or something. And I just don't see it because I remember following that team. And their problem was they had so many injuries throughout the season that group just never had any kind of continuity. I don't remember how many games they got together. I'm talking about Nash, Kobe, Gasol, and Howard. I'm not sure how many games that starting 4 or starting 5 or whatever, how many games they actually ever got to play together. But I don't think it was anything close to enough to actually have formed some kind of chemistry to where they could make a deep playoff run. You had problems like, if you can think back to the game that they had in Miami, where Dwight Howard was under the rim and Nash didn't get him the ball and they started like yelling at each other on court. You had some friction between Kobe and Howard that year. Like there was just so much extra stuff going on that it's really hard to imagine that they get into the playoffs as an 8th seed and they just magically become good enough and magically develop the chemistry to knock out the Spurs, who were like this close to being the NBA champions that year. We're talking if we replay that finals game 6, 9 times out of 10 the Spurs would win it. So maybe they wouldn't have gotten swept. Maybe Kobe would have been good enough to get them some wins in that series, maybe 1 or 2. But the 2013 Lakers just had so many problems. Like one thing I didn't even mention, Dwight Howard just was not even himself. It looks good on paper, but obviously by that point Nash definitely wasn't himself. He had like a break in his leg very early on in that season. But Dwight Howard was nothing like the Orlando Magic Dwight Howard. That shoulder injury and the back problems that he had, it just wasn't the same. So fun what if, but I am not going to reach. I'm not going to create some fairy tale. That team definitely had problems that were deeper than just injuries. Next question asks, should not being able to beat the Golden State Warriors and win a ring be held against current players? You know, I don't know that is held against current players as a popular opinion. So what I'm saying is, you know that there's a group of people that no matter how LeBron James lost or the context behind it, there is that group that just doesn't care. But I think the majority of us understand, because I think this applies to James Harden too. I think the majority of us understand that this Warriors team is just on another level than anything we've ever seen before. The roster is on another level. The style of basketball they can play, just there aren't many teams that can even get close to that level when they're at their best. So I don't know that amongst people who really know this game, I don't know that it's really held against anybody. I don't know anybody who can seriously look at the 2018 NBA Finals and hold losing that against LeBron James. I just don't. I think the thing with Houston last year, I think the issue is that they were up 3-2 and they had a double-digit lead in both Game 6 and Game 7. So especially when you consider the fact that was not the first time that Harden kind of disappointed in a situation where people thought he should have really went off, maybe they might start holding it against him a bit. But the way I feel about that series is it wouldn't have been that close if Golden State had no injuries that series. If Iguodala hadn't went out and they had to give Kevon Looney more minutes, causing them to have to do different things with their rotations. I think if that doesn't happen, I don't see it going 7 games. I don't see the Warriors being down 2-3. I'm always going to maintain that. And I don't want to be a part of the crowd that makes excuses for players. Like maybe it sounds like I'm making excuses for Harden or LeBron James. But if you can't beat the greatest shooting team ever with probably the most talent a regular NBA team has ever had, especially when your team is not really close to that, I just don't see how it can realistically be held against you. Like I think even for the Rockets last year, it would have been easier to hold that against them if Chris Paul were playing and then they lost a 3-2 lead and, you know, lost a double-digit leads. Then I think it would be easier to hold it against them. But speaking to those double-digit leads that they had in both Game 6 and Game 7, we already know what the deal. That's part of what I'm talking about, where how this team is something we never seen. We already know what the deal is when you're up by 15 points against Golden State. That can be gone in like 3 minutes. That's a couple of 3-pointers for the Golden State Warriors. That's no problem for them, and that's not something you can say about pretty much any other team in NBA history. Same goes for whatever team makes the NBA Finals this year. In my opinion, it's just kind of like do the best you can, because I feel like the media spends all year trying to find flaws with Golden State. Maybe their bench isn't as good or their defense isn't as good as it is some years. People trying to pinpoint where a team can beat them. It's your job, I guess so, whatever. But the facts are that if you take the Warriors at their best and any other team in the league at their best, nobody's really close. So if Giannis gets to the finals this year and he wins the MVP award over the summer, but he wound up losing to the Warriors 4-1, unless he's just total trash, like he just had a terrible series and he was nothing like he was in the regular season, unless something like that happens, holding it against him would be kind of silly in my opinion. Now, let me draw a line though. That does not mean we start talking about it in terms of, oh, these losses don't count. Now, I hate when people say that because if you lost, you lost. Like, it counts. But I'm also not about to start knocking anybody's legacy for not being able to beat what I consider the most stacked team of all time, the most star-powered team of all time. I'm not about to be knocking any legacies for that. Unless the star player is total trash and he's a huge reason why the team lost or got swept, then we can talk. But other than that, nah. Speaking of legacies, Jacob is asking, will LeBron hurt his legacy if he can't take this group to the playoffs? I don't think it's going to do some type of irreparable damage to it, but the way this season happened, yes, I think it might hurt a little bit because of the way it's happening, right? If we take it back to the trade deadline where he's being very vocal about wanting Anthony Davis and he's hinting at it, obviously that gets into the young guys' minds a little bit. The team chemistry goes down because there was like 6 or 7 players that were on the chopping block. Combine that with the fact that his defensive effort at times during the season has not been the greatest. Combine that with the fact that there are certain games that they lost that this team simply should not have lost. Yes, I think it will hurt a little bit that he came to the Western Conference after 8 years of making the NBA Finals and did not even make the playoffs. Now, let me keep explaining because I can already see people jumping to the keyboards. The thing is that there's going to be a group of people saying, I told you so, because they're going to be saying, look, when LeBron was in the East and the team, they went on a losing streak, or if LeBron got hurt, like in 2015, I think he probably missed the most games out of that second Cleveland stretch. They're going to be saying back then it was not a problem because the Eastern Conference was significantly weaker, so they could afford a slide and then they would only be like 6th seed and they could still come back. And they're going to say, we always told you couldn't pull that. You couldn't be resting all the time in the Western Conference. And he went there and he had the groin injury and then the whole trade saga, and he couldn't pull off that same magic. So at some point, there's going to have to be some type of responsibility around things that don't go right in LeBron's career because I feel like for so long, context has been saving him. The context of losing in the 07 finals or whatever happened in 2014 and against the Warriors. It's like everywhere that there's a failure in his career, aside from 2011, it's like almost every other place, there's a way to give him a pass for it. Now, the reason I'm saying it's not going to be anything irreparable is because the people who watch this season will say, before the injuries, they were still a 4th seed. They were a top 4 team in the West, so things were chugging along beautifully. So you're not going to be able to just say, oh, he went from the East to West and he couldn't manage. That's going to be revisionist history. I believe that's a revision people are going to be making in 5 years if he does miss the playoffs, and that's the way they're going to want to write it. I believe that's irresponsible and that's unfair and that's totally dishonest. But there will need to be responsibility for things like a lack of a defensive effort. There will need to be responsibility for laughing and joking on camera about Anthony Davis joining the team when half of your teammates are on the trading block. These are real guys who play for the team. Like, these are real people. They hear this stuff. They see this stuff. Team chemistry is a real thing. I just turn it off in 2K, but in real life, that's not really cool. But the other part I have to add here is that it also depends what happens over this last 20 games. As I'm recording this, they were in a game with the Bucks until the end. A crucial mistake basically cost him the game. Eric Bledsoe, contract extension, Bledsoe lit them up. It's gonna totally depend what happens down the stretch. They've got now a little bit over a month to make up a 3-game difference. The San Antonio Spurs are 8th right now. And it's gonna depend. Do they keep losing to teams that they shouldn't lose to? Does LeBron significantly pick up his defensive effort like he kinda hinted that he would in the media? I don't know. We're gonna need to see how it happens over this last 20 games. But I will just, continue to say it won't be a good look that a lot of people thought that he came to LA just to kind of chill anyways. A lot of people have had this feeling like he came here, and especially once he said that he wasn't chasing anything he didn't have anymore. there's gonna be a piece of it that looks like he came to LA to be in LA. And that actually, for me, that's disappointing. And that's why I was so shocked when he went to LA this summer, because I feel like a player who has the chance to be the greatest of all time, and for someone who was a free agent where in 2018 he was still at the top of his game, he looked like he really hadn't lost much other than not being crazy athletic every single night all the time. You know how he likes to preserve his body and all that. Other than that, I was like, he can go to many teams and still contend for an NBA title, or he can try to build something. And so it's very disappointing to me that he just kind of went to LA with the mood of, oh, I don't really need to do anything else. This is just it for me. 2016 made me the GOAT. That kind of stuff to me is disappointing because I felt like, why didn't you think of somewhere like Houston or Philly? You go there with a legitimate chance to contend right away, but instead you end up in LA with injuries and chemistry issues that end up resulting in you missing the playoffs. I mean, by all means, any NBA player has the liberty to do whatever he wants to do with his career and for his family. But for someone as great as him, like I said this in a different video, whether it was a barbershop talk or the last podcast, if LA doesn't get somebody this summer, that's pretty much a wrap on his career as far as really contending for anything. And then it's gonna feel like, especially if they've missed the playoffs, it's gonna feel like he's left something on the table. And that, it's not gonna damage his legacy, it's not gonna do anything crazy to it, but it's gonna be something that you look at there. Kobe was competing at an elite level until he tore his Achilles and that was it for his career. Michael retired on a championship. And it just won't look that great if you retire calling yourself the GOAT as you're missing the playoffs and not contending for anything. That's not a good look in my opinion. Anyways, that is all for today. If you want your questions featured in this show, make sure to follow me on Instagram. It's Dom_2K. Make sure to hit that like button, comment, and sub if you enjoyed, and I will see you guys a week from now. Thanks for watching.